Cry of Fear is a mod for the original Half-Life and sees a young man named Simon go through a Silent Hill-styled nightmare. Atmosphere. The muted colour palette and urban surroundings give the game a cold, lonely feel. Its Silent Hill-style music and visuals come and go in waves. It's incredibly tense when exploring dimly lit rooms with your phone torch. Doors bang, horrific screams are heard with sometimes no identifiable source, and of course the constant threat of enemies potentially lurking in every room. Cry of Fear also likes to limit the player, whether it be limited light, inventory slots, save points, navigation, stamina, or mobility. The game always seems to be making you force your way through a narrow tunnel or giving you a fine line of success, throwing you into bewildering scenarios where you feel you aren't meant to survive. It's very stressful having to choose between your only health item, the only source of light in a pitch black area, or the only means of defending yourself when something bad is coming. The limited save points means if you die at any point you could be made to go back through a previous area where you struggled, putting yet more pressure on you to not die and find a save point. The game's lack of a map and myriad of rooms with multiple doors makes its locations extremely confusing to explore and try and remember the way out when you want to leave in a hurry. Its atmosphere is thick with dread and anxiety, its gameplay is stressful, and the empty city turned into a horrific nightmare is extremely depressing. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. Cry of Fear uses a lot of jump scares. Some of them are more effective than others. Enemies jump out of the scenery, up from knee-deep water, charge at you from a distance, or hover in the air, making horrible howling screams and looking absolutely grotesque. These are some of the ugliest, most disturbing enemies I've ever seen in a video game. The limited graphic technology of the Half-Life engine does them no favors and actively makes them more creepy. However, it's understated enemies that I found more disturbing. There's one that is just a tall woman in a white robe who hovers in the air and makes you shoot yourself if you don't kill her first. Bumping into something like that in a dark room is absolutely horrifying. The downside to this is that the game is fairly long and certain enemies repeat a lot more than others. Sometimes when you enter a new area you'll hear something like an aforementioned screaming or a chainsaw revving and have to explore the rooms one by one to try and find your way out before you find the source of the noise. I found sections like these terrifying. The anticipation is nerve-wracking. The game does its chase scenes, which involves a one-hit kill if your pursuer catches you as you run blindly through a new area. The limited stamina bar was a frightening hindrance to begin with, as if it depletes you slow down dramatically and it's pretty much a death sentence. However, I found if you don't sprint, your pursuer will stop, swing the chainsaw, but because you're still moving forwards, he'll miss and you can keep on going at a casual pace until you reach the exit. Just don't stop. Finally, the game has a lot of bugs that can work for you, but usually against you. Some enemies can pass through walls, you'll get caught on things, and sometimes you'll try to go through a door and the game will instead turn you around so you're facing out of the door you just tried to go through. These are irritating, but usually don't ruin the experience. That's 2 Harry Masons. Sound design. The screams and howls of the enemies are so pained and tortured that you'll be able to recall them long after the game has ended. The music is dark, twisted and melancholic. Thumps and bangs follow distorted metallic growls like it was all played with rusty metal. The more somber pieces give a feeling of despair. The sound effects are all stock, but everything sounds punchy and pretty satisfying. That's 3 Harry Masons. Gore. Heads exploding and people getting their faces stamped on, blood-splattered walls, a child bursts from the stomach of an enemy and attacks you, and every gunshot that hits leaves a bloodstain on the wall behind it. Even the simple act of healing involves you jabbing a syringe into your wrists, but the limits of the engine prevent things from getting too intense. Some of the stuff that would have been more detailed are done off camera. For the limitations of the game engine, though, it's pretty damn impressive. That's 4 Harry Masons. some spoilers here, so skip ahead if you don't want parts of the game ruined. Story. Simon is travelling home late one night and gets involved in a car crash. Everything that happens after that is a depressing nightmare of seemingly random events, following a gas-masked doctor through the majority of the game and meeting the love of his life just before she randomly commits suicide. A lot of the game feels like it was written by an angsty teen. The character dialogue is very predictable, with no one seeming to know what's going on until the end, and even then I was left with questions. The notes and letters left laying around on the floor of the apartments near the start of the game were really cheesy and generic psychopath-style writing. I've heard a lot of people compliment the story, but it just didn't do anything for me, making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. Cry of Fear is brutal, depressing, and horrifying. Its difficulty and bugs make the game an even more stressful experience, but it takes a lot of great ideas and executes most of them extremely well. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was terrified by screams in the dark, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching, and always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.